the news came out recently, and I didn't know the context at first, that they're not going ahead with the Stargate show on Amazon. And my first reaction is, well, you'd probably be grateful because Amazon would fuck it up.
The legendary cast members of Stargate-SG1 and the Stargate Atlantis spin-off series have publicly responded to Amazon MGM Studios' shocking cancellation of Martin Garrow's anticipated new Stargate series, with the original franchise veterans expressing their disappointment, frustration, and concern about what the cancellation means for the future of a beloved franchise that defined their careers and that continues to mean something profound to millions of fans worldwide. According to reports and social media posts from cast members spanning both the original SG-1 series and the Atlantis spin-off, the cancellation has struck a nerve across the entire Stargate family, with actors who spent years building these beloved characters feeling the loss intensely and willing to publicly voice their concerns about Amazon's decision-making process and lack of transparency. The responses from the cast have been notably unified in their disappointment and frustration, suggesting that this cancellation represents something that the Stargate family views as a significant loss not just for the franchise, but for what the franchise represents in terms of quality science fiction storytelling and in terms of opportunities for the creative people who built it. What is particularly striking about the cast's response is the apparent sense of betrayal that many of them apparently feel. Not just betrayal by Amazon, but betrayal of the fans who have apparently remained loyal to Stargate for nearly 3 decades, and betrayal of what the franchise had apparently meant in terms of representation of thoughtful, intelligent science fiction on television. Michael Shanks, who played the iconic Dr. Daniel Jackson in Stargate-SG1, and who remained deeply connected to the franchise throughout his career, was the first cast member to publicly respond to the cancellation news. His initial response was measured but somber, simply tweeting, "Yep, they did that," acknowledging the news with apparent resignation, but also with clear dismay at Amazon's decision to cancel what many viewed as a promising project with strong creative credentials. But what makes Shanks' response particularly significant is the context in which it occurred. The Stargate Revival project had been apparently in serious development for months. According to reports from entertainment outlets, Martin Garrow had spent 2 years developing the series. By early 2026, London had been selected as the primary production hub. A writer's room was actively operating in Los Angeles. Scripts were being developed. Production designer Nathan Crowley, whose impressive credits include Interstellar, The Dark Knight, and Wicked, had joined the project. Emmy-winning visual effects supervisor Mohan Leo, known for his work on Andor and Rogue One, had also been brought on board. The production infrastructure was apparently being put into place, locations were apparently being scouted, and filming was scheduled to begin in fall 2026. This level of advanced development made Amazon's apparent cancellation decision particularly shocking to Shanks and to the entire cast. The project was apparently not in early development stages where cancellations might be more understandable. Instead, it was apparently in late-stage pre-production, with major creative talent attached, and with production apparently only months away. For Shanks to see this apparently suddenly canceled just weeks before production was scheduled to begin apparently felt like a betrayal not just of the creative team, but of the entire Stargate community that had apparently been waiting years for new content. But Shanks quickly shifted from accepting the cancellation to actively fighting against it. He followed his initial response with a call to action that became the rallying cry for the entire Save Stargate movement. Shanks urged fans to speak up, saying, "I'm gonna simply say this. If you are at all interested in a Stargate show with any of the original creators, performers involved, now is the time to say something. Otherwise, it really will be the end of that chapter forever. Let them know you are there." This statement captured something essential about what was at stake for Shanks and for the entire Stargate family. The cancellation represented not just the loss of one television project, but the potential end of any possibility for new Stargate content involving the original cast and creators. For Shanks, who had played Daniel Jackson for 10 seasons and who had spent years building that character into something beloved by audiences worldwide, the cancellation meant the end of an era. Shanks apparently understood that if this particular revival failed to move forward, the door might apparently close forever on the possibility of new Stargate stories with the people who had made the franchise matter to audiences in the first place. Joseph Malozzi, the longtime Stargate writer and producer who had spent years working on the franchise and who was serving as a consulting producer on the canceled series, also responded publicly to the cancellation. Malozzi posted on social media, "Sadly, it's true. Amazon has elected not to move forward with the new Stargate series. There's not much I can add beyond confirming what's happened, but I will say this. Creator Martin Gero developed a new Stargate series over 2 years, ultimately crafting a show that offered a fresh jumping-on point for new viewers while deeply respecting existing canon." Malozzi's statement served as both confirmation of the cancellation and as a defense of the project that Amazon had just canceled. By emphasizing that Gero had spent 2 years developing the series, and by highlighting the care the creative team had taken in crafting a show that respected existing canon while welcoming new viewers, Malozzi was trying to contradict the narrative that had emerged about why the project had been canceled. What Malozzi was apparently trying to communicate was that this had been a serious, thoughtful project developed by people who genuinely understood and respected the Stargate legacy. Malozzi also directly disputed Amazon's stated reasoning for the cancellation. When reports emerged that Amazon had canceled the show because executives were concerned the series would not have broad appeal beyond the franchise's dedicated fan base, Malozzi pushed back aggressively. He posted, "Nope, no, sorry. Gonna have to push back on this. We were ever mindful of creating a show that would have broad appeal." This statement carried significant weight because Malozzi had been directly involved in the project's development. He was directly challenging Amazon's characterization of the project and suggesting that the streaming giant's stated reason for the cancellation was inaccurate. Malozzi went further in another post, saying that Amazon's reasoning was a hastily cobbled together shit-take of conjecture and misdirection, demonstrating his genuine frustration with how Amazon was trying to explain the cancellation. Malozzi apparently felt that Amazon was being intellectually dishonest about its reasons for the decision, and he apparently wanted to publicly call out what he apparently viewed as dishonest spin. Rachel Luttrell, who played Tayla Emigan in Stargate Atlantis and who was one of the most beloved cast members of that spin-off series, also responded publicly to the cancellation. According to reports, Luttrell shared a nostalgic post on social media with memories of her time on Atlantis. She posted, "Still us. Found these gems from 2008 taken in a dusty abandoned building back when we were both navigating new parenthood and a very different season of life. Time keeps moving, but certain friendships stay beautifully untouched by it. Love you, Jason?" Luttrell was sharing a photograph from the set of Atlantis with her co-star Jason Momoa, who played Ronan Dex in the spin-off series. By sharing this nostalgic content, and by emphasizing the bonds that had been formed during the Atlantis years, Luttrell was trying to keep the spirit of Stargate alive, even as the franchise faced uncertainty about its future. She also shared petition links, encouraging fans to continue fighting to save the franchise. Her response was deeply personal, showing genuine emotion about what Stargate and the cast connections had apparently meant to her over the years. The fact that she was apparently willing to publicly support the Save Stargate campaign apparently demonstrated that Stargate Atlantis cast members, not just the original SG1 cast, apparently cared deeply about what the franchise apparently represented and apparently wanted to fight for its future. Luttrell's response was also significant because it apparently demonstrated that the cancellation had affected not just the SG1 cast, but the entire Stargate family across all iterations of the franchise. The cancellation was not just about losing a potential SG1 revival, it apparently was about losing the apparent possibility of any meaningful continuation of the entire Stargate universe that had been built over nearly 3 decades of television. David Hewlett, who played the brilliant and sarcastic Rodney McKay in Stargate Atlantis, and who was one of the most beloved and most memorable characters in the entire spin-off series, also responded to the cancellation. According to reports, Hewlett responded with humor mixed with frustration. He posted a clip from Atlantis of his character's commanding officer, John Shepard, throwing an enemy off a ledge, comparing Amazon's treatment of the Stargate project to Shepard throwing the project off a metaphorical ledge. Hewlett wrote while sharing the clip, "McKay as Stargate reboot, Shepard as Amazon/Prime Video would not have broad appeal." By using this humorous comparison, Hewlett was simultaneously criticizing Amazon's decision, while also being somewhat lighthearted about it. The comparison suggested that Amazon had treated the project carelessly, throwing it away without giving it a fair chance or valuing what the creative team had built. It was a clever way of expressing frustration through humor, which was particularly fitting given that humor was a significant part of what made Hewlett's character so beloved in the Atlantis series. Hewlett was apparently using the wit and intelligence that had made McKay a fan favorite to apparently criticize Amazon's apparently poor decision-making. By bringing his character into the conversation about the cancellation, Hewlett was apparently connecting the legacy that Stargate had apparently built with current corporate decision-making, apparently suggesting that Amazon's approach to the Stargate revival apparently lacked the intelligence and care that apparently made the franchise special in the first place. Robert Picardo, who played Richard Woolsey in Stargate Atlantis and who was one of the most respected cast members of the franchise, also joined the backlash against Amazon's cancellation. According to reports, Picardo expressed concern about the cancellation and supported the fan efforts to save the franchise. His involvement in the public response demonstrated that the disappointment about the cancellation was apparently not limited to younger or more social media active cast members, but spanned the entire cast across generations and across different eras of the franchise. Brad Wright, one of the two original co-creators of Stargate-SG1 and one of the creative minds that had built the entire franchise into the cultural phenomenon it became, also expressed his disappointment with Amazon's decision. Wright was involved with the canceled project in a consulting capacity and understood what Amazon had been building before apparently canceling it on what Wright apparently viewed as weak reasoning. The unified response from the cast reflected how deeply the cancellation had affected the entire Stargate family. These were not just random actors or casual observers complaining about a business decision. These were the people who had built the franchise, who had spent years developing these characters, and who still had genuine passion for Stargate and for what it meant to fans worldwide. Their willingness to publicly voice their concerns and to actively support fan efforts to save the franchise demonstrated that this cancellation apparently mattered to them on a personal level. One of the most significant aspects of the cast's response was the emphasis on the project's quality and respect for the franchise's legacy. When Malozzi described how Garrow had spent 2 years crafting a show that offered a fresh jumping-on point for new viewers while deeply respecting existing canon, he was making a clear statement about what the creative team had been trying to accomplish. This was not apparently a cynical cash grab or a poorly conceived project. Instead, the creative team had been trying to honor what made Stargate special while also trying to welcome new audiences to the franchise. The cancellation represented the loss of what could have been a genuinely meaningful continuation of the franchise. The apparent gap between what the creative team had been trying to accomplish and what Amazon claimed had motivated the cancellation was apparently particularly frustrating to the cast and crew. If Amazon's stated reason for the cancellation, that the show would not have broad appeal beyond the dedicated fan base, was inaccurate, then what had really motivated the decision? This apparent mystery and lack of transparency from Amazon had become one of the most frustrating aspects of the entire cancellation situation. Amazon had not offered any detailed explanation for its decision. The streaming giant had simply announced the cancellation without providing any public commentary or clarity about what had gone wrong or what had motivated the decision. For Shanks, Malozzi, Luttrell, Hewlett, Picardo, and all the other members of the Stargate family who had worked on the franchise, this silence was profoundly frustrating. They had spent years building something that had meant something to them, and now apparently a major streaming service was throwing it away without even explaining why. The lack of transparency was perhaps just as insulting as the cancellation itself, suggesting that Amazon apparently didn't feel obligated to explain its decisions to the creative teams or to the fan bases that had supported Stargate over the years. The cast's united response had the effect of keeping the Save Stargate movement alive and keeping pressure on Amazon to reconsider. Within days of the cancellation announcement, and in response to the cast members' calls for action, over 100,000 fans had signed petitions calling on Amazon to reconsider the decision. The #SaveStargate hashtag began trending on social media. Fans organized a fundraising campaign to raise money to fly a banner over Amazon Studios' headquarters. The entire effort had the feeling of a genuine grassroots movement, backed and amplified by members of the cast who still had genuine passion for the franchise. For fans who had grown up with Stargate-SG1 in the late 1990s and early 2000s, who had followed the franchise through its various spin-offs and iterations, and who had remained hoping for a meaningful continuation of the franchise they loved, the cast's response was profoundly meaningful. Shanks, Malotzi, Luttrell, Hewlett, and the other cast members were not simply accepting Amazon's decision. Instead, they were using their platforms, their reputations, and their influence to fight for the franchise and to keep hope alive that somehow, some way, Stargate might eventually return to screens. The cast's response also had broader implications for how streaming services approach beloved franchises and how they treat the creative people who built those franchises. The unified response from the Stargate family was a clear message to Amazon and to other streaming services that canceling beloved franchises without transparency, without good reason, and without respecting the creative teams and fan bases that built those franchises was not going to pass without response or without consequence. By going public with their frustration, by disputing Amazon's stated reasoning, by calling on fans to speak up, and by keeping the Save Stargate movement alive, the cast members were doing something that was rare in contemporary entertainment. They were using their positions and their platforms to actually fight against corporate decisions and to try to force a change in Amazon's position. Whether Amazon would eventually reconsider remained uncertain, but what was clear was that the Stargate family was not going to let the franchise disappear without a fight. The significance of the cast's unified response extended far beyond just Stargate. Their willingness to publicly criticize a major streaming service and to actively mobilize fan communities against a corporate decision apparently sent a message throughout the entertainment industry about the power dynamics between streaming services and the creative people who build beloved franchises. For years, streaming services had apparently operated with relative impunity, canceling shows and shelving projects with minimal explanation or accountability. The Stargate cast's response apparently demonstrated that this pattern was apparently changing, that creators and talent were apparently becoming more willing to push back publicly against what they apparently viewed as unfair or short-sighted decisions. The cast's response also apparently reflected a broader concern about the state of science fiction on television. As several entertainment observers noted in the aftermath of the cancellation, other beloved sci-fi franchises were also apparently struggling. Doctor Who had announced a hiatus. Star Trek had apparently 0 shows in active development. And now Stargate had apparently been cancelled at the last minute. The apparent pattern suggested that major streaming services were losing interest in long-form science fiction television, apparently preferring to invest in other genres or types of content that apparently seemed to generate more immediate returns on investment. For the cast members who had apparently spent decades building Stargate and who apparently understood the franchise's cultural significance, this apparent trend was apparently deeply troubling. Stargate-SG1 had apparently been one of the most successful and most respected science fiction series ever produced. The franchise had apparently generated billions of dollars in revenue for studios over the years. It apparently had developed one of the most passionate and devoted fan bases in entertainment history. For a major streaming service to apparently cancel a revival of such a beloved franchise, apparently without adequate explanation, apparently suggested that streaming services apparently no longer valued long-form science fiction the way traditional television networks had apparently valued it. The cast's response also apparently highlighted the apparent gap between what corporations apparently claim to value and how they apparently actually treated the properties and the people who apparently built those properties. Amazon had publicly expressed its commitment to expanding the Stargate franchise. The company had announced the new series with great fanfare in November 2025. Senior executives apparently greeted the announcement with enthusiasm. But apparently just months later, when the project was apparently weeks away from production, Amazon apparently decided to cancel it without offering adequate explanation, or apparently respecting the time and effort the creative team had invested. For the cast and creative team, this apparent flip-flop was deeply frustrating. It apparently suggested that Amazon had not trusted its own creative leadership. It apparently suggested that business side considerations apparently overruled creative considerations at the last minute. It apparently suggested that Amazon apparently viewed the Stargate franchise as disposable rather than as a precious cultural property worth protecting and nurturing. The cast's willingness to speak out about these concerns was significant because it represented a rare moment of transparency in an industry that had often operated with considerable opacity. When actors and creators publicly criticize major studios or streaming services, they take real professional risks. They potentially jeopardize future opportunities. They potentially make themselves targets for industry marginalization. For Shanks, Malozzi, Luttrell, Hewlett, Picardo, and the other cast members to be willing to take these risks in order to fight for the Stargate franchise suggested that they felt something was genuinely wrong and that it was worth fighting for. Their response was an act of professional courage in an industry where speaking out against major corporate decisions is often discouraged or suppressed. What remains to be seen is whether the cast's unified response and the massive fan campaign they helped mobilize will ultimately convince Amazon to reconsider its cancellation decision. As of mid-June 2026, Amazon had remained completely silent on the matter, offering no indication that the company was considering reversing course. But the fact that the cast and fans had apparently mounted such a significant and sustained campaign suggested that there was still hope that the decision might be reconsidered at some point. The larger significance of the Stargate cancellation and the cast's response apparently extends beyond just this one franchise. The situation apparently served as a stark reminder of the power dynamics in contemporary entertainment, where major streaming services apparently wielded enormous power over beloved cultural properties, and where the people who had built those properties apparently often had limited ability to protect them or to ensure they were treated with respect and care. The cast's response also apparently demonstrated that this power imbalance was apparently beginning to shift, at least somewhat. By going public with their concerns, by mobilizing fan communities, and by refusing to accept Amazon's silence and lack of explanation, Shanks, Malozzi, Luttrell, Hewlett, Picardo, Wright, and the other members of the Stargate family apparently showed that creators and talent could push back against corporate decisions, and could make their voices heard in ways that could not be easily ignored or suppressed. Whether Amazon would ultimately reconsider the cancellation decision remained uncertain, but what was certain was that the Stargate family's response had apparently transformed the cancellation from a quiet corporate decision into a major entertainment industry story that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The cast had apparently ensured that the cancellation would not pass without protest, without explanation being demanded, and without the franchise's legacy being honored and acknowledged.